Me and a very close friend of mine spent the entire summer going around spelunking in the caves of New Mexico and Arizona. This is where what I believe we encountered some sort of cave creature. I don't know much about the wildlife in these states, but I'm pretty sure what we heard doesn't match any vocal description of any critter that would live in a cave. I don't know exactly what cave we went into, because it wasn't one that was popularized, or one that you could go into freely. We kind of just like to explore the barren desert, as much as we can, as safe as we can. Usually, we don't traverse into any Narnia-style caves, where it goes on and on forever, into a magical world. Generally, they're just small little hollowed-out caves, maybe a few chambers deep. Nothing to rant and rave about. Nothing to get too excited about. Sometimes you don't find anything. Other times you might find bones here or there. And no human bones. Generally just animal bones. Generally, from what I believe, they're used as small dens of animals, but nothing more exciting than that. I think for my friend and I, it's just the complete and utter thrill of exploring and finding new things. But there's a cavern we found that was in eastern Arizona, I believe, or southeastern Arizona, that we're not exactly sure what was dwelling down in it. We found it in a little alcove in the rock, and when we both fit inside, the chamber was surprisingly very flat, and maybe no bigger than 15 by 15, if I were to think correctly. There was a second chamber, which led down a little bit in a very small tunnel, one that we had to get on our hands and knees and crawl to. Upon arriving in the second chamber, this one opened up quite a bit. I don't know the dimensions, but there was much more room to stand up and move around. There didn't appear to be any animal life. No signs of any bedding down, or nesting, or bones. Really any sign that there was anything ever living in there. But the problem is that we both felt something unnatural. A weird feeling in this tiny cave. Something that we've never gotten in other caverns ever before. A feeling like we shouldn't be in there. I don't mean to be cliché and horror story-like, but that's what we felt. My friend and I were both uneasy, even though we didn't discuss it with each other in that moment. I kind of felt a little shaky, a little dizzy and lightheaded, but I figured it might be just due to pressure changes in the air, even though I don't know how likely that is, and there's no way we were more than 20 feet below the surface of the ground. The closer we went into the chamber, or the closer to the next chamber I should say, the more I felt the screaming need to get out, and I learned in this instance that it's bad to ignore your gut instincts. But I wasn't exactly sure why. This large chamber we were in kind of curved a little bit, and once you make it past the curving in the rock, it led to another smaller tunnel, in which you had to get on your hands and knees. Although we could look in there and see, it appeared to lead into yet another chamber. We were kind of getting excited, wondering how many chambers this would lead to. But as soon as I got down to all fours, and began to poke my head in this tunnel, to see how far the tunnel would go, and how far into the next chamber, we heard a noise. Me and my friend did. It was very distinctive. The cave was very quiet. You could hear a pin drop, so there's no reason that he wouldn't hear it, and only I would. The sound we heard was about a 5 to 10 second growl, a really low rumbling growl. It wasn't rocks falling or rocks colliding. It was distinctly an animal, and something very large on the other side of the tunnel in the following chamber. Think of like a lion in the savannas. Take the pitch of that lion and drop it down. Add way more bass to it, and that's what it sounded like. Or maybe a hippopotamus and a wildebeest and a lion all in one. It sounded huge, and it definitely freaked both of us out. It only let out like a low moan growl and then ceased. After that, I looked at my friend, who was very wide-eyed and pale, and we both had the same expression on our face. What was that? Without saying anything, we both motioned to go back, and we did, hastily. We clambered through the other tunnel, back into the first chamber, and very quickly made our way out the very small tunnel up into the ground. We got out of there and decided to cut our day short from that point, even though it was only about 2 p.m. in the afternoon, and we'd generally be out till dark, which is around 7 or 8. The following day, we never really discussed it until a few days later when we were on the phone speaking, and I brought up the event, and we started thinking about things that could have been. Unfortunately, there was nothing conclusive to what we think could be in that cave. It was definitely biological, some sort of animal. That much we did know. There was something beyond that small tunnel in the next chamber over. What it was or who it was, we'll never know. And to be honest with you, I'm glad I didn't take a chance to go see what it was for myself, because I feel like had I did, I probably wouldn't be here to tell you my story. But that's all just guessing. Me and my friend, I feel, made the best decision in the situation we had. I believe there are things that hide out in caves that we don't know about. But if it was that big, and it got down past that tunnel into the following chamber, I don't even know how it fit down there. But that would also mean there are other probably larger tunnels that lead to the following chamber. Where they come out in the rock, I don't know. Maybe it was nocturnal. I can say for certainty, though, this was by no means any mountain lion. You could tell by the growl it emitted. It was far too large, far too big set of lungs to be making a sound like that. I was scared. My friend was scared. We obviously both heard something we had never heard before. I don't know if this fits into any of the stories you might read to your audience, but I hope that you'll find it of interest. I used to live in Colorado for quite some time, about 8 or 9 years before moving states. In that time, I gained quite a bit of good friends, a few of them of the Ute tribe. And boy, did they have some crazy stories to share with me. Bigfoots, other creatures you could not imagine, even supposedly skinwalkers. Today, I wanted to share with you a couple of things they told me about, from their tribe and their tradition. They lived up near the mountains. Which ones, I'm not sure, since Colorado is home to many. And overall, I don't know too much about the Ute tribe, and where in Colorado they traveled to, and had villages at. But the stories that were shared with me were terrifying. When these guys, their grandfathers, were younger, and they lived in the villages, they would tell me about how sometimes they would see these giant hairy men come out down from the mountain, steal their women and children during the nighttime, and eat them, or cannibalize. It's terrifying. When these young men, as they grew up, went to hunt these giant men down, they would see them climbing in and out of caves where they supposedly lived, hiding the bodies of the dead children they abducted and the dead women from the night before. I don't know how much of this is true, but supposedly they would kidnap the women and use them for breeding. I don't know how much that would work, and I don't know how much truth there is to that. These were just stories passed on to me and tradition from their tribe. There were also many caves that the fiercest warriors of the tribe at the time would refuse to go near or into due to what was living in them, and not just bears. They believed these giant men, or these giant hairy beasts, would be dwelling in them, living, and doing other things. Apparently, close by this same village used to be the den of bears, but it had now been ransacked and cleared through by these large ape-like men who now dwelt in the place. The small den was now littered with human bones and skulls that it would now abduct from the village, like the women and children. Only a few of the warriors of the village actually discovered this before meeting their own demise, while some were able to make it back to the village to actually retell their accounts. While there's not a whole lot of information to share with you here, the premise is that these large human beings, which I believe they're speaking about, are Bigfoot or Sasquatch, many of them hiding out in these caves and waiting until nightfall, or the perfect time to strike the village, to abduct more women and children to eat. Surprisingly, there is a correlation between them and what the natives in Northern California refer to as mountain devils, who did the exact same thing. I don't know if in Northern California they would also hide in caverns, but they would, just like in Colorado, wait for nightfall to come and raid the villages for women and children, to take back and eat. The thought of being a Ute warrior at the time, to go and scout out things, and to come across a cavern, only to have 2 or 3 of these massive hairy human beasts step out and kill you, is terrifying in and of itself, even if you grew up in combat and being trained to protect your village. There's nothing more terrifying than being outclassed and outnumbered by these beasts that dwell in the caves of the mountain. Okay, so I got a pretty creepy to share with you. This took place back in June and July of 2013. I was going on a road trip with my friends, and we were driving all around the South. We had just come from eastern Texas, and were now in Texarkana, where we thought we'd lay low for a couple of days to kind of just sightsee the area, maybe go on some hikes, or explore the wilderness, since it was really hot and muggy. Just our perfect environment. After talking around with locals and seeing if there was anything interesting to do, we eventually got in a conversation with this older gentleman who used to be a very thorough hunter in the area, had done and seen a lot, and he gave us fair warning of the things that were out in the wilderness. Let me explain to you in a little more detail. He was told, or we were told specifically, to watch out for ground tunnels, is what he referred to. Large openings in the earth that were tunnels that, well, he didn't exactly say where they led to, but he just said, look out for the large animals that come out of them. We were confused, and we asked him if he meant bears, and he clearly said no. These were unlike any animal that you find in the wilderness, and they are extremely dangerous and violent, and we should stay away from them. In fact, after that, he kind of referred to us going out in the wilderness and hiking as a pretty bad idea, and it would be better if we just passed through and found other areas to go through. We kind of thought he was pulling our leg, and that the entirety of what he had to tell us was nonsense. Texarkana is not a small town plagued by monsters. In fact, there are many people around here that love going out fishing in the swamps and doing all sorts of outdoor recreational activities. Surely he was just crazy. But that's when we started talking to other individuals around town. They mentioned similar things. Large ground tunnels is what they referred to it as. I'd never heard of anything like it, and my friends and I all had been around this area more than once. This wasn't our first time through the area, and not our first time in Texarkana. After hearing it from a third person, we eventually just decided to maybe move on and find a more interesting area. Not that we were exactly afraid of running into a ground tunnel entrance. It's interesting to me that nobody gave hint to anything dangerous living in the swamp, like snakes or gators. Just these large underground tunnels that apparently have very large dangerous animals coming in and out of them, and that we were not to be anywhere around them, for our lives were in danger. Very strange. It was a very surreal time. Kind of felt like we were almost in a movie. Some sort of monster serial killer movie, I guess. Anyway, we ended up resuming our road trip and left the state. We never did find out what those ground tunnels were, or what the large animals people were referring to coming out of them. As we entered into other states, we had asked if anybody had ever heard of anything called ground tunnels out in the swamps of the land. Nobody knew what we were talking about. Even people who were hunters or experienced outdoorsmen could know what we meant. They were confused and would ask us, do you mean like alligator dens or what? So, it's pretty inconclusive. Maybe there really is something to the Texarkana ground tunnels in that area. I'll tell you what though, I am a little creeped out still, even now 7+ years later, and I don't really want to go out looking for them. Even if the 3 people we spoke to were just lying. I don't know.